Those who've dated someone completely insane. What incident made you realize you were dating a psycho? Story 1. We were riding the train home from a date. I looked over, and she was logging into her ex-boyfriend's Facebook account. I asked her what she was doing, and she straight up told me that she was logging into her ex-boyfriend's Facebook account. When I asked why, she said, "I'm just checking up on him. I want to make sure he's okay. He never changed his password." Her checking up on him became reading through not just his statuses, but also his private messages. I asked why she couldn't just look at his profile normally, and she said he had blocked her. When I asked why she couldn't just text him if it was that big of a deal, she said he had blocked her number too. I had so many more questions, but she started getting pissed off and defensive, and I still had a long train ride home, so I let it be. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I dated this girl for about 8 months. She was into roleplay, and one night she suggested we switch things up. I trusted her, so I agreed. She handcuffed me and tied my ankles to the post. I thought it was all part of the act. Then, out of nowhere, she got fully dressed, walked out of the room, and left me there tied up. I had no idea what was going on. An hour later, she came back, only she wasn't alone. She had brought 2 other guys with her. What happened next was one of the most humiliating and shocking experiences of my life. She made me sit there, helpless, while she banged them both in front of my eyes. When she finally untied me, I asked her what the hell that was all about. Her explanation? She said she knew I was cheating on her with a girl at work. I wasn't, not even close. But in her mind, this was her way of getting even. I moved out the very next day. Story 3. I didn't really understand how unhealthy she was until after our breakup. She proceeded to key WHORE into the side of my car about a week later because she assumed I had already started seeing other women. She tracked down every single person I knew on Facebook, including family members and the CEO of my company, to send them a fairly unflattering and risky picture. The picture also came with a page-long story of how I couldn't be trusted, claiming I had mistreated her, stolen money from her, etc. I had to get a restraining order and take her to court for trying to sabotage my life and career. It was super messed up, and I genuinely hope she got some help. Thankfully, I haven't heard from her in almost 4 years, and I now live on the opposite side of the country. The conversation with my boss went as well as it could have. He never doubted my story or anything. He knew me pretty well and knew I wasn't capable of doing any of those things to my girlfriend. It also helped that she had called the office multiple times demanding to speak with me. When our administrative assistants wouldn't connect her, she would make threats and so on. I was already somewhat on the radar before the pictures and stories were sent. Thanksgiving that year with my family was, well, hilarious and mortifying. Story 4. My boyfriend accused me of cheating when I started going to study at the very quiet library while in college. I was taking organic chemistry and some 4,000-level science classes, and quite understandably, spent a lot of time studying. He was a high school dropout who played Battlefield and Call of Duty at top volume when he wasn't working at his part-time job at a large box store, and it was distracting as hell to study at home. I wound up leaving him a few years later to go to grad school as far away from him as I could get. He wound up moving back to our hometown to start a lawn business that's pretty much a front for something else. Edit. We dated for 5 years. He never once complimented me in a way that was actually a compliment. I'd tell a joke and he'd be like, "Haha, you're funny, funny looking." I'd get dressed up and he'd tell me I looked pretty ugly. He was a giant a-hole. Edit part 2. For everyone asking why I stayed for 5 years and saying it's my fault for staying that long, when we first got together, he obviously wasn't the way he ended up being. He was charming, fun, sweet, and we had a good time. He didn't start being terrible to me for about a year to a year and a half. The relationship seemed fine and then degraded, and by then I was so isolated from everyone else, I felt like I had no one but him. Keep in mind, I was a college student. I worked part-time while going to school full-time. I would have been homeless and living in my car if I had left him then. The moral of the story and the point of this thread is when you realized you were with a psychopath and left. Yeah, it took me a long time and I wish it hadn't. I've grown and I've learned from the situation, and I'm happy with where I am now. Story 5. I went to get an IUD placed, and it went horribly wrong. I passed out and had to go to the ER for an ultrasound, but my boyfriend was more concerned about sex until my roommate went off on him and he said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was a misunderstanding." I have to go to the cancer center to get infusions for my ulcerative colitis, and I wanted him to come because it gets boring and I like his presence. Plus, it always takes a good 4 or 5 attempts to get a vein, and having him there helped. But the infusion is 4 hours long and he didn't want to come, so I said it was okay, and he offered to pick me up. I gave him a time when it should have been done, but they used smaller needles and it took a little longer by 15 minutes. He was angry when he came and literally left, so I had to call an Uber to get back home because he didn't want to wait 15 minutes. In the grand finale, I had spent the last couple of months taking care of him because he had a severe case of mono. We had plans to move to a different state because I got my dream job and he said he wanted to be with me. So I graduate, he's there, we get all the photos, etc. 3 days later, he called me, broke up with me, blocked my number, gave no explanation, and that was it. He's tried to contact me multiple times since then, but the last time, about a week ago, I told him to leave me alone and blocked his number. Story 6. Maybe not a psychopath, but certainly a sociopath. So many little things to choose from. Here is one. In order to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, I had to walk through the living room. This involved me walking in front of the TV. I had to walk in front of it to get to the kitchen. I always did it super quickly, but I always got screamed at. Sometimes I would have to wait 20-40 minutes before I was allowed to walk past. One day, while my husband was out, he's my ex-husband now, I decided to rotate the entire living room. I put the TV on a different wall and moved the couch so it faced the TV. Basically, the living room was exactly the same, just rotated 90 degrees. The living room was a square, so it functionally made no difference, except now when I walked from the bedroom to the kitchen, I didn't have to walk between the couch and the TV. When my husband got home, he saw the living room and said nothing about it. We ate dinner, and he watched TV as usual. Then we went to bed. The next morning, he refused to get out of bed or talk to me. He refused to leave the house, go to class, or watch TV, anything. He would not say one word. I kept trying to get him to tell me what was wrong, and he wouldn't. For 3 solid days, he only got out of bed to grab food or use the restroom. He would not talk to me, would not make eye contact or acknowledge my presence. I was panicking, thinking he was having some sort of episode. It might seem obvious now, but I had no clue what I had done wrong. At the end of 3 days, he said he felt like I had adequately been punished for rearranging the living room without asking. He even told me to keep it that way. It made more sense, and he liked it better like that. He still had to punish me for what I did, though. Edit to answer some commonly asked questions. 1. Was he mentally ill? He was never diagnosed, but I would assume something was certainly wrong with him. 2. Did he have autism? No. I have a master's degree in special education and am trained to recognize it. I can see how it might appear that way from one story, but I can assure you that he did not have autism. 3. Why did you marry him? Stay? Did you know he was difficult? There were hints he was a bit of a jerk, but I had no idea how bad it was or would get. I had very low self-esteem and felt I deserved to be treated badly. 4. Don't you know it's inconsiderate to rearrange furniture without asking? I guess so. I didn't think about it. I most likely should have asked. I still do not think I deserved his reaction. I was just trying to problem solve and maybe didn't think it over as much as I should have. 5. Did you get out? Yes. I caught him cheating on me for the 7th time, and he stopped letting me leave the house because he was afraid I would revenge cheat or leave him. One day we had no clean clothes, so I left to wash them at the laundromat. While I was gone, he called me and told me if I didn't come home, he would leave the baby home alone. I rushed home. The next day I went to the laundromat and took the baby with me. He called and said if I didn't come home, he would kill himself. I told him to go ahead and hung up. Then I dialed 911 and had the police do a welfare check on him. He was arrested for warrants due to unpaid speeding tickets. While he was in jail, I changed the locks and never let him back in. 6. Are you happy now? Yes, I'm remarried to a wonderful man. My daughter is 9 and very happy and healthy. She's smart, and my husband treats her like his own child. 7. Why didn't you crawl across the floor to avoid walking in front of the TV? I was very pregnant. 8. Where is he now? He found another girl to take advantage of and abuse. Got her pregnant too. She kicked him out, and he couch surfed for a while before becoming homeless in Cleveland. 9. Does he have full custody of your daughter? No. I have sole custody and he wants nothing to do with her. He once told me he didn't want her unless he could have me too. Story 7. There's a particular kind of terror that comes from never knowing which version of someone you're going to encounter when you walk through the door. It's the fear that settles in your chest and never quite leaves, the hypervigilance that becomes your new normal. This is the story of how psychological warfare can make you question your own reality. I should have known something was seriously wrong. The first time he brought out the gun, but when you're living with someone day after day, the abnormal can start to feel routine faster than you'd think possible. It usually happened in the evenings, often after he'd had a few drinks and was feeling what he called playful. I'd be doing something mundane, washing dishes, folding laundry, reading a book on the couch. That's when I'd hear the familiar sound of his firearm safe opening in the bedroom. My stomach would immediately knot up because I knew what was coming. He'd walk into whatever room I was in, firearm in hand, with this twisted grin on his face that I learned to dread. "Hey, babe," he'd say casually, as if he wasn't holding a loaded weapon. "Look what I found." Then came the performance that never got less terrifying, no matter how many times he repeated it. He'd make a show of checking that the safety was on, clicking it back and forth a few times so I could hear it. "Safety's on," he'd announce, like this made everything perfectly reasonable. Then he'd point it directly at me. "Bang!" he'd shout, and I'd jump every single time. My body's natural response to having a weapon aimed at me never diminished, never got easier to control. And that reaction, my genuine fear, was exactly what he was looking for. He'd laugh and laugh, doubling over with delight at my terror. "That'd be funny if the safety was off, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?" he'd repeat, watching my face carefully to make sure his words were having the desired effect. Sometimes he'd do it multiple times in one evening, savoring my fear like it was entertainment designed just for him. The worst part wasn't even the immediate fear, though that was horrible enough, it was what came after. The next morning, I'd wake up with that familiar knot still in my stomach, the memory of the night before playing on repeat in my mind. I'd try to bring it up casually, maybe over coffee or breakfast. "About last night. I'd begin carefully when you pointed the gun at me, and that's when his expression would change completely. The cruel amusement from the night before would be replaced by genuine-looking confusion, as if I'd just told him I'd seen him sprout wings and fly around the room. "What are you talking about?" he'd say, his voice taking on that patient tone people use when they think someone is being unreasonable. "I didn't point any gun at you. I cleaned my gun last night, but I never pointed it at anyone." The first few times this happened, I was so shocked by his denial that I didn't know how to respond. I'd stand there, mouth opening and closing, trying to find words for something that seemed so obvious it shouldn't need explanation. But you did. I'd insist, my voice starting to sound uncertain even to myself. You said bang and laughed when I jumped. You asked if it would be funny if the safety was off. He'd look at me with what appeared to be genuine concern, shaking his head slowly. Honey, I think you might have had a nightmare or something. I would never do anything like that. You know I'd never want to scare you. He was the king of gaslighting, though I didn't have a name for it back then. I just knew that conversations with him had started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. It wasn't just the gun incidents he'd deny. He'd contradict me about conversations we'd had, places we'd been, things he'd said or done, small things at first, what we'd had for dinner the night before, whether he'd promised to pick something up from the store, what movie we'd watched, but gradually the denials became more significant and more frequent. Every time I tried to hold him accountable for something, he'd flip the script. I was remembering wrong. I was being dramatic. I was imagining things. Maybe I should see someone about my memory problems. It got to the point where I was seriously doubting my own sanity. I started second-guessing every memory, every perception, every instinct. Had he really pointed that gun at me, or was I somehow making it up? Was I really becoming the unstable person he suggested I was becoming? I began keeping a journal, writing down incidents immediately after they happened, desperate to have some record that would prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. But even then, when I'd reread my own words the next day, I'd wonder if I'd somehow exaggerated or misunderstood what had really happened. The psychological impact was devastating. When someone systematically undermines your ability to trust your own perceptions, your confidence in everything begins to crumble. I found myself constantly apologizing for things I wasn't sure I'd done wrong, agreeing with his version of events even when every instinct told me he was lying. Looking back now, I can see that the gun incidents weren't random acts of cruelty. They were calculated moves in a larger campaign of psychological control. The fear kept me walking on eggshells, never knowing when the next game might happen. The gaslighting that followed made me doubt my own ability to accurately assess my situation. It was a perfect storm of intimidation and manipulation designed to keep me off balance and dependent on his version of reality. And for a terrifyingly long time, it worked. The scariest part wasn't the gun itself. It was how effectively he made me question whether any of it had really happened at all. When you can trust your own memories, how can you trust your judgment about anything else? Many people don't understand it. When someone repeatedly tells you that events didn't happen or didn't occur even remotely as you remember them, it seriously messes with your mind. This is especially true if it happens after or during an argument when you're already tense and your memory isn't going to be completely clear. No, you remember the important pieces, but sometimes the details can be foggy. I've been through this myself, and like you, I often questioned my own sanity. Maybe it really was all my fault. I started writing things down for a while, but it became too painful to look at those records. For years afterward, I worried constantly about forgetting all of the disturbing incidents, thinking that someday I would have to prove my case. Now I really have to struggle to recall some of it, and am better off for it. What's the point of forcing myself to relive those experiences? It took about 5 years of being on my own to heal. Story 8. My friend encountered someone with serious psychological issues. He met her at a bar and ended up taking her home. She decided it should be more than just a one-night stand and suggested a date the following weekend. He agreed. Their first date involved meeting her parents, where she told them about how she and my friend were going to spend the rest of their lives together, where they would buy a house, the names of their 2 future children, and so on. He dated her for about a month, and after they broke up, she began stalking his friends, not him, but his friends. She would somehow find out where we would be and threaten us with lawsuits for ruining her life. Story 9. I was dating a woman who demanded I call her every day. She would hit me for sitting wrong. She once lashed out at me over a social media website that was popular in my country, Lunarstorm. You could see who had visited your profile. She noticed that many people from my hometown had looked at her profile and was furious. She said, "You should talk about me enough so that people aren't curious." When I responded, "Wouldn't that make people more curious?" She lost it and screamed at me. She also screamed at me for telling other people that a family member of mine had attempted to self-harm before I told her about it. She was attractive but unstable. I broke up with her, and for years afterward, she would send me emails telling me I had ruined her life. I encountered her on a train a couple of years later. She was with her new boyfriend who looked completely defeated. Story 10. I went out to eat at Buffalo Wild Wings one night with a few friends and told her about it. I saw a couple of her friends come in and sit at a table near us, but they never ordered anything. They just drank water and sat there, occasionally glancing at us. After we finished eating, we walked outside, and sure enough, I saw my girlfriend's car now for obvious reasons in the parking lot. Her driver's seat was reclined all the way back, and I could just barely see that she was in the driver's seat trying to hide. I was already feeling uneasy at this point, so my friends and I left. As soon as we backed out, her car started and backed out as well. She began following us through the parking lot. At this point, I was texting her asking what was going on, but she kept saying she was with her mom hanging out. Needless to say, I ended things shortly after that incident. Story 11. She was nothing short of a master manipulator. I should have heeded the warning from her own friend, someone who knew her well enough to pull me aside and earnestly advise me not to get involved with her. But against all better judgment, I ignored that red flag. Not once, but twice, I fell into her trap like a moth drawn to a destructive flame. Her tactics were as transparent as they were relentless. Elaborate schemes and manufactured crises, all meticulously designed to manipulate me into opening my wallet. She would orchestrate dramatic situations, play the victim with Oscar-worthy performances, and deploy every emotional manipulation in her arsenal to extract money from me. When I finally summoned the strength to sever all ties and close the door on her toxic presence in my life, her true colors emerged in their most pathetic form. This woman, well into her mid-20s and supposedly an independent adult, actually threatened to involve her father in our personal affairs. The sheer absurdity of it was almost laughable, a grown woman running to daddy when her manipulation tactics finally failed. But the final insult came later, when word reached me through mutual friends that she had been bragging, actually boasting about how successfully she had used me as her personal ATM. The callousness of it, the complete lack of shame or remorse, revealed the true depths of her character. I'm not someone who typically harbors resentment or holds on to anger. Life is too short, and grudges are usually more burden than they're worth. But for her, for the calculated cruelty and shameless exploitation, I made a rare and lasting exception. Story 12. After our breakup, she embarked on a destructive campaign that devastated multiple lives. First, she systematically poisoned my relationships by convincing our entire friend group that I was a sociopath, using carefully crafted lies and manipulative tactics to isolate me from people I'd known for years. Her own life spiraled rapidly downward as she developed a serious drug addiction, becoming heavily dependent on illegal substances. What started as personal destruction soon turned into exploitation of others when she began dealing drugs to support her habit. Most disturbingly, she attempted to manipulate one of our mutual friends into addiction, seeing dollar signs rather than the human cost of her actions. Her predatory behavior didn't stop there when she discovered that a vulnerable young man with autism had romantic feelings for her. She callously exploited his emotions and trust. She began an elaborate deception, feigning romantic interest while systematically draining his financial resources. Her manipulation was so thorough and calculated that she left him financially devastated, unable to afford his college tuition, effectively derailing his educational future and dreams for temporary monetary gain. Story 13. I was married to someone who turned out to be living a complete double life. One day, he told me he was going to the woods to harm himself. Terrified, I immediately called the police and explained that I believed he was having a military PTSD episode, as he had always claimed to be a veteran. The police intervened, took away his weapon for safety, and that's when they delivered shocking news: he had never served in the military, not a single day. 4 years into our marriage, and his entire identity was a fabrication. Looking back, I realized how cleverly he had manipulated the situation. My first husband had been a legitimate veteran who preferred not to discuss his service, so this behavior seemed normal to me. The person I married claimed he was embarrassed about not having a career like his military brothers, so I respectfully never brought it up at family gatherings, which would have been rude if his story had been true. After this revelation, I documented all the damage to our home from his outbursts, obtained a restraining order, and filed for divorce. The courts were not sympathetic to someone using stolen valor as justification for destructive and manipulative behavior. He was an expert manipulator and emotional abuser who had constructed an elaborate false identity. From what I learned later, he repeated this same pattern with his second wife, who also ended up divorcing him. Update. This happened years ago, and my life is much better now. To anyone who has experienced similar deception and manipulation, please know that you deserve honesty and respect in your relationships. Story 14. He wanted me to text him my work schedule and would then call me on the work phone and wait in the parking lot for me to come out of work. He wanted to know how much was in each paycheck. One time I texted him my work schedule and he misread it and panicked non-stop for 6 hours searching for me. He called my whole family and was about to alert the police. It was his own fault. He had misread what I had texted him. I broke up with him in public because he wouldn't believe it when I broke up with him in private. It finally reached the point where random people nearby were saying, "You just got dumped." Story 15. Not me, but this happened to a friend. His girlfriend had been taking trips to a specific city for months because her mother had been diagnosed with lupus and apparently needed a lot of care. One day, before leaving for another trip to see her mother, she broke up with my friend because she felt she was being a bad girlfriend and couldn't devote enough time to him. My friend took it like a champ and wished her the best. She even left the door open for a possible continuation of their relationship once her mother got better. She spent that weekend texting him about how hard it was to take care of her mother and how she had gotten no sleep because she spent the night at the hospital. This whole time, my friend was being incredibly supportive, texting her studies on lupus and other helpful information. A few days later, my friend was randomly checking his Facebook and saw one of those 360-degree panoramic pictures posted by someone he knew had also had a relationship with his ex. The picture was taken at a popular music festival that happened to be near the city where his ex-mom lived, so my friend panned around and there was his ex, partying it up. It turned out that instead of visiting her sick mother, she had gone to this music festival and hooked back up with this guy. He found pictures of her there all weekend, which meant she was at the festival the entire time, and all that texting about being at the hospital was complete lies. He's not even sure if her mom ever had lupus. She might have been hooking up with this guy for months. He immediately confronted her, and her response was to just ghost him. Absolutely insane. My friend wasn't even that angry. He mostly just felt sad for her. She could have just broken up with him months ago, but instead decided to launch a massive campaign of lies so she could have her cake and eat it too. I really wonder if she feels any remorse about it at all. Edit. Since this kind of blew up, I want to add a few things. My friend has started going to therapy and is doing really well. He knows he's going to have some trust issues moving forward and wants to address those as soon as possible. I'm really inspired by how emotionally well he's handled this situation. Another thing, to those replying with derogatory comments about women, that's not helpful. She happened to be a woman, and my friend happened to be a man, but I've seen plenty of similar situations where the genders were flipped. Both women and men are generally good people. Poor behavior knows no gender boundaries. Story 16. When he told me this, I had been dating this guy for a while and thought things were going really well. I'll never forget that day because he took me to see Aladdin. We got back to my place and everything seemed normal. We were talking when suddenly he got this weird look in his eyes. He said, "I can't see you anymore. I'm afraid I might hurt you." I was thinking he meant hurt me emotionally, like cheat on me or something psychological. I kind of laughed and told him not to worry, that I was a grown-up and whatever happened we could try to work it out. His voice changed and he looked even more troubled as he said, "You don't understand. I've been having these dreams where I hurt you. I mean really hurt you." Then he jumped off the couch and ran out the front door. I never saw him again. I never tried to call him because it really shook me up. I guess I should be glad it stopped there. He had seemed so normal up to that point. Story 17. It was a normal Sunday evening. My ex-husband had been without a job for going on a few years now. He was well aware that I had to approve several dozen employees' time cards before Monday so I could submit payroll. I did this every Sunday evening for 3 years, and the process took about an hour and a half. Another thing that was common was that he was an alcoholic with a very bad temper. Apparently this evening he had some serious issues with me completing my employees' time card approvals after I had spent an hour cooking dinner for him and my son. So I'm sitting there on the floor of my living room because I couldn't afford a couch. I was extremely poor. As I'm eating dinner and working, all I hear is him yelling at me to put down work and pay attention to him. Before I could say, "I'm almost done, just a few more moments," he comes up to me with a full plate of food, takes a huge bite of tilapia, chews it up thoroughly, then spits it out all over my face and keyboard. I was in complete shock. I couldn't believe the man I was married to would spit food in my face and all over my work. I just sat there in disbelief. I am so glad that person is out of my life. Story 18. I was seeing a girl for a while who I thought I really hit it off with. We were into the same stuff, etc., but something in my gut was telling me something was off, so I broke it off and tried to remain friendly with her. I found out later from her roommate that she was playing a long con with me and was only pretending to be into everything I liked in an attempt to domesticate me. I also learned that once I broke things off, she got so angry she smashed a shot glass against their door. When her roommate went to sweep it up, she said, "No, leave it. Those are the shattered pieces of my heart." Safe to say I have no regrets and have never doubted my gut instinct since. Story 19. I was lying in bed one night after a fight, most likely over something trivial, when my girlfriend fell out of the bed. Maybe she rolled out, but it seemed like a fall. She then stood up and started running into walls. She hurt herself up pretty badly, and I couldn't get her to stop. The downstairs neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. The police showed up and saw her sitting on the couch all bloody. They became very interested in me. I tried to explain that she was running herself into the walls, but they didn't believe me. Who in their right mind would? Fortunately for me, she stood up and ran across the room right into a wall, practically knocking herself out. The police provided me an escort to the hospital. They still didn't trust me. I suspect, after the hospital staff took her into the back by herself to ask her if I was hurting her, I'm sure they allowed me in the back room. While waiting, she got out of bed and grabbed a bunch of gauze from the cabinet and started wiping the floor with it. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she was cleaning the floor so the fish could see out of it. During her 2-month stay on the top floor of the hospital, I continued to visit her. Story 20. When I was 20, I dated a girl for a month or so who told me up front that she really liked it when guys make the first move romantically. Being a clueless young man with no dating experience, I figured she wasn't serious and didn't attempt anything after our next date. I dropped her off at her house and she gave me grief for not heeding her advice. We made out and she told me I should go for it next time. On our next date, we were in my car with the sunroof open, looking at the stars. I started trying to kiss her, and she pushed me away, saying, "What are you doing? Do you really think I'm the type of girl you can force yourself on whenever you want?" To this day, I have no idea if she was testing me. Maybe she actually had a particular interest and was hoping I'd continue to try while she resisted. But if she did, she should have been very clear about it, because there was no way I was going to try anything after being told no. No means no, and that's final. The whole thing left me completely confused, and this date wound up being the last time I saw her. Story 21. Here is the improved version with better grammar and flow. He sent me to pick up a present he had gotten for his friend's baby shower at a toy store. I went there and asked for it, but they said they didn't have an order. I called him and gave my phone to the cashier. After a moment, she gave the phone back to me, saying, "I will not be talked to like that." I was so confused. She said he had been very rude to her and refused to help me. I left the store. When I came home, he denied being rude to her and got mad at me for taking her side. Later, he told me I had ruined everything and that we wouldn't be going to the baby shower because his friend was very upset. I was confused and felt awful, so I called his friend to apologize. She had no idea what I was talking about. I realized he had lied about the whole thing to make me feel like a bad person, and it made me realize he had been gaslighting me throughout our entire 3-year relationship, making me feel bad about things he made up to make me feel crazy. Edit. I'm a guy, by the way, and yes, I did say he gaslighted me. Story 22. We met at a bar. At the time, I was drinking a lot, and so was she. I could put away quite a bit, and even though she was only about 135 pounds, she could keep up with me. She would stay over often. We'd use the jacuzzi, watch movies, and always be drinking. But then things started to get concerning. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to find her already pouring shots in the bedroom. Eventually, I decided to stop keeping much alcohol in the house, otherwise she would just drink all day. One morning, when there wasn't any left, she demanded I take her to the store for a Four Loko. I was already late for work and tried to just leave, but she jumped into the passenger seat in only her robe and refused to get out. As I drove off and passed the nearby 7-Eleven, she got so angry that she grabbed the gear shift and threw the car into park while I was going 40 miles an hour. That was the moment I realized just how unstable things had gotten. Honestly, it felt like living proof of the so-called crazy hot scale. She was a 9 in looks, but at least a 10 in instability. Story 23. I went to take a shower, and he was in my college bedroom with my phone. When I came back, he said he was leaving and was visibly upset. I asked what was wrong, and it turned out he had looked through my phone while I was gone. He had gone into my deleted pictures and saw a photo of my male housemate that I had deleted, along with others, to free up space on my phone. He knew my housemate and knew we were friends, completely platonic, yet this caused a huge fight because he believed I was cheating. I tried to break up with him then, but he completely changed his attitude and begged me not to. I've been free of him for 2 years now, and I've never been happier. Story 24. It really wasn't obvious at first. This was my first long-term boyfriend, and I was younger than I am today. It started with little quirks. Once he got into doing something, I'd be ignored even if he had invited me over. Not abusive, just weird. Then, when I had plans, he'd guilt me into canceling them so we could do something together instead. Over time, there were more isolating behaviors. I was almost always with him, and when I wasn't, he monitored what I was doing, looking through my phone, for example. One time, a friend kissed me on the cheek as a joke. He laughed in the moment, but later, when it was just the two of us, he yelled at me. He really did show different faces to different people. Gradually, it built up to the point where he went from being an attentive boyfriend to feeling more like my soul keeper. Then, one day, it was like a switch flipped. He just lost interest. Being suddenly dumped without reason hurt at the time, but looking back, I'm glad it happened. I don't know if it's related, but about half a year ago, I found out he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm not sure of the specifics, but he's somewhere on that spectrum. Story 25. Here's the improved version with better grammar and flow. I was the psycho myself. I don't like using that word since the stigma toward mental health is already bad enough. But you get my point. I have borderline personality disorder, BPD. When you think of the stereotypical crazy ex, you're most likely thinking of us. Back when I was an undiagnosed and very stressed out teenager living with an abusive, alcoholic, narcissistic parent, I had essentially no self-control. I was a mean, manipulative person who dated people just to gain social power and made friends just to control them. I didn't enjoy it. I hated myself for being such a jerk, but I was seriously struggling with my mental health. Not that that's a valid excuse for that behavior, just an explanation. I felt like I had no control over my life, so the only way I could cope was to control other people. People with BPD come across as destructive, chaotic, evil hurricanes who get off on destroying everyone and everything in their path, but in reality we're extremely sensitive. We have no emotional armor, so we put on a tough, abrasive persona or tough attitude too, since BPD is far more common in women than men in an attempt to protect ourselves. People with BPD are extremely afraid of abandonment, either real or perceived. We're terrified that people we love, trust, or look up to will abandon us. We fear that we'll be judged as harshly as we judge ourselves. We have chronically low self-esteem, unstable self-image, and believe we're not deserving of love and are unworthy of healthy relationships. So what do? Well, if we believe someone is going to leave us anyway, we prefer to strike preemptively. I'm going to be as terrible as possible, so you'll break up with me. We also struggle with compartmentalization, meaning we flip-flop between black and white, love and hate, good and evil. If you're being nice to us, we absolutely idolize you, trust you completely, worship you completely, and believe you're not capable of doing anything wrong. Then when you inevitably make a mistake, since you're only human, of course, we immediately flip 180 degrees and demonize your entire existence, not because we actually hate you, but rather in self-defense from a perceived threat of abandonment or rejection. There's a really good book on this subject with a fitting title, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. I would encourage anyone struggling with BPD, whether because you have it, your partner does, or even if you think your ex might have, to read it. It's incredibly helpful in understanding the chaotic storm of emotions and destructive behaviors. The key thing to know is that people with BPD are almost always being self-destructive. We're really trying to hurt ourselves, not other people. The rates of self-harm, drug abuse, alcohol addiction, and suicide are extremely high for us. It's also important that partners of people with BPD, their exes, abuse survivors, etc., seek therapy or at least find some way to process what they've endured. There's some legitimate trauma that can stem from those relationships for both partners. I was finally diagnosed with an unholy combination of PTSD, OCD, ADHD, depression, and anxiety, all in the last 2 years. However, I've made so much progress that my current therapist and doctor both aren't sure if I have enough qualifying BPD traits left, especially after doing DBT and CBT for so long. I wish I had been given the resources at the time to figure my life out. I wish someone had noticed how much pain I was in, that I was being emotionally and sexually abused, or that I desperately wanted to be loved. I wish I could say I'm sorry to the people I hurt. Not that I really deserve forgiveness, grace is earned, not owed, but I still live with guilt over my past and make a conscious effort to be a better person every day. Oh, one bit of interesting news. BPD might undergo a name change to emotional instability disorder, possibly reclassifying it as not a personality disorder anymore too, in the upcoming DSM-VI, as more researchers are advocating to end the negative stigma toward it and mental health in general. I ended up going into the psychology field myself, forensic psychology degree, and my primary focus and field of study is personality disorders. Story 26. I came over before he got home from work as usual. I opened his computer, which I did all the time. I had the password, and he had left Plenty of Fish and Cougar Life open and logged in. I was shocked and looked at messages. He'd been trying to meet up with women near us for a while. I called him, and he freaked out and told me he set the account up for a friend. Of course I knew it was lies, but I wanted closure and stuck around until he got home from work. Bad move. I broke up with him, and he took my phone and keys, literally slammed the door in my face, shoved me, restrained me, and did everything he could to keep me inside the house with him. It was the most terrifying thing because he was way bigger than me, and I had never been so powerless in my life. He was so much bigger than me and just screaming at me at the top of his lungs with the veins in his neck standing out, holding my arms as tightly as he could. I eventually ended up curled in a ball on the couch, dissociating. I hadn't realized until then how abusive he was. I was a frog in boiling water. It had been going on for a while. I finally talked him down and he let me go. I didn't go to the police because I was in shock and I was shaky for days. I found out way later that he was charged with ever severe case and false imprisonment of another woman down the line and only received probation, and I really wish I had gone to the police when it happened to me. If I had, I have no doubt that he'd be in prison now after his second offense. You want to know the worst part? I got back together with him and stayed with this guy for a few more months until things escalated even further. We finally broke up for the last time and he tried to contact me for years. I still have panic attacks when I hear a man yelling at a woman, and I'm still wary of unknown numbers. I check his name in the court records every once in a while, hoping he's either incarcerated or no longer a threat. I'm not a naive person. This situation is so hard to get out of, and I have so much more empathy now for women who don't leave their abusive partners. Stay strong, ladies. You can do it. Story 27. When she admitted that she'd only wanted to see if I could fall in love with her. For a bit of context, I'm a pretty skeptical person by nature, and that's putting it mildly. I don't trust people easily and don't like people easily. I began talking to her, mostly out of boredom, and got along well with her. I wound up helping her through a couple of small emotional crises, around which time she admitted feelings for me. She'd call me almost every day, but not in a creepy way, more just very cheery and happy-go-lucky, and I developed a very genuine affection for her. Not long after I told her as much, she went very cold. After a bit of pursuing her, she became annoyed and told me the above. The only time I heard from her after that was when she would randomly call to tell me certain specifics of her current relationship, presumably just to see my reaction. Story 28. It started out with little things, comparing me to his exes, but always favorably at first. He seemed overly enthusiastic about wanting to join me in activities and hobbies I did without him. He'd force his way in and then pout or make fun the whole time, but it was subtle at first. Like he'd make legitimate jokes about my hobbies that I'd laugh off, but it kept getting worse and more frequent. He'd then put me down, but subtly, backhanded compliments. And if I caught on and got upset, he'd say he was joking with this smile that never reached his eyes. He had actually the prettiest eyes I've ever seen. So blue and so light, they were almost white, but there was nothing behind them. One night we were lying on the couch, drinking beer, watching a game, and just relaxing. We were having a good time when out of nowhere he said he wanted to die. I took him seriously and started asking more questions. He shook his head back and forth like he was in a daze and claimed he didn't say that. Things got much worse after that. I want to say I left him as the manipulation or outright emotional mistreatment escalated, but I always remembered the good times. Things finally came to an end when he became physically aggressive to me in a rage. He proceeded to be so sorry, called me, followed me at work, sent me flowers. It was my sister I credit with helping me. I hadn't revealed much of this to my family because he had slowly been isolating me, but also because I felt crazy. I felt like I was reading too deep into his comments, suggestions, etc. When tried to harm me physically, I ran straight to my sister. Even during this conversation, he kept calling and texting me and I wasn't focusing on talking to her. She took my phone, looked me in the eyes, and told me, "He's dangerous. You know that, right?" I left him, left everything I had at his house, and moved on. It took years and dating some more grounded people, but I've moved on. Story 29. I had been talking to a girl online, and we agreed to go out on a date. I showed up to pick her up, and she walked to my car while already on the phone. She got in the passenger seat, and we started driving to the movies. She was in the middle of a tearful conversation with her estranged father. She casually put a finger to her lips to signal me to be quiet while she talked. We were about 15 minutes out of town, and she stayed on the phone the entire time. It quickly became clear she was working him for money, basically making amends after 7 years, so he would wire her some cash. Mid-conversation, she asked if we could stop at Dollar General so she could get a prepaid card. Awkwardly, having never really spoken to her in person before, I agreed. She ran in, got the card, came out still talking to her father, gave him all the information, and even squeezed out a few tears for effect. Once the card was loaded, she told him she was glad to have him back in her life, said she loved him, and hung up. Then, with a cheerful smile, she said, "That jerk, I can't stand him." She apologized for the awkwardness like nothing had happened and went on with the date as if it were perfectly normal. Story 30. I was the psycho. I know better now, but neither of us knew until she broke up with me. And it was a 6-year relationship. I had to go to therapy and a bunch of other things. I could give reasons why I acted the way I did here, but the truth is that they're all weak excuses, and I was just a jerk who didn't want to own up to the fact that I was the bad guy. I made a huge post about it a while back, but I don't want to just repost what I said. If you're curious, you can go looking through my comment history, but I'll give a list of some random things here. I showered her with unwanted affection post-breakup to try and win her back, including making cutout hearts and writing things I loved about her and taping them all over her car while she was at work, which to my unhealthy mind wasn't stalking, but it totally was. She didn't like it, so I accused her of stealing from my future wife's time with me, physical intimacy with me, and emotional intimacy with me, since she kind of knew she didn't want to be with me, but stayed anyway. I tried to sabotage her new relationship by telling her parents who I was close with the things I found out by logging into her email and Facebook and sending screenshots of their inappropriate conversations to them. I did this anonymously, and when she confronted me about it, I straight up lied to her face about it and said I had no idea who did it, but we both knew I wasn't fooling anyone. Then, to get back at her for all the hurt she caused me, I started smoking, drinking, and doing drugs. It hurts to remind myself of all this, so I'll stop there. I'm a better person now, but it took therapy, rehab, and faith to make me realize the burden I was to society and men as a whole. I watched my life go off-road and veer straight for a pedestrian walkway, and the scariest thing was that I was behind the wheel and knew it. I couldn't claim to be young and inexperienced, I couldn't claim unending heartbreak, and I couldn't put the blame on someone who, through no fault of her own, just stopped loving me. I was hurt, and I wanted her to hurt as bad as I did, so I destroyed everything around me that I cared about. I love all the wonderful things and great friends I found in therapy and rehab, but darn it, do I wish I had learned those things before acting out. When you show your true colors like that, No matter how much better you've gotten, people just don't trust or like you anymore. I'll probably have to move someday just so I can have a name that doesn't turn calm faces into hateful, angry sneers of pure disdain. I am a burden on this town, and no matter how much you try to clean a blackened name into at least the semblance of a memory of something better, everyone will remember only what they saw when the spotlight landed on you when it was time to show everyone what you're made of. Regardless of what I am made of now, when it counted and everyone was watching me, at that moment, I was made of hate and anger and bitterness, and no one will forget it. Story 31. This woman was incredibly attractive. She told me jokingly that she had been following me on Instagram for a month before reaching out to make sure I was what she wanted. I just shrugged it off. But then it occurred to me, we had matched on Match.com 2 months earlier, though she never acknowledged it for some reason. I was attracted to her, and we became intimate on the first date. She wanted to come over the next day, and I thought things were going well, but her behavior changed completely. She withheld physical intimacy and affection entirely. I figured this might be developing into something more serious, so I decided to be patient and mature about it. Then she started coming over daily, and within 2 weeks she had left half her belongings at my place and was occupying all my free time while showing no affection. She told me I needed to be careful not to hurt her because her ex-boyfriend had mistreated her while she slept for 2 years, and that she was emotionally fragile and might harm herself. I told her we needed to either rebuild our physical connection or significantly slow things down. Perhaps just weekend dates until she felt more comfortable, but that she couldn't essentially move into my place. After that conversation, she completely cut off contact. She never responded to any messages or calls. I eventually boxed up her belongings and shipped them to her mother's house where she lives, and she never once acknowledged receiving them or attempted to communicate with me. Story 32. I dated a woman in college for 2 years. It took me far longer than it should have to realize she had serious issues. Naturally, all my friends recognized this from day one. Some of the warning signs while we were dating were subtle, though she was extremely controlling. The most disturbing behavior happened after I came to my senses and ended the relationship. My friends and I worked for the college during summers and received free on-campus housing as part of our compensation. She had a similar arrangement with a different department. By this time, we had already broken up. There was a large rock outside my building. Every single time I walked past it, she would be sitting there crying. If I walked by with friends, she would stare at me intensely. Whenever I passed by with a female friend, I'd receive a text within minutes asking, "Is that who you're sleeping with now?" The most alarming incident involved the building where we lived during summer. It was C-shaped with a courtyard in the center. My room was on one side, directly across from my friend's room. One evening while I was in my room, my friend called me from across the courtyard. They had spotted my ex-girlfriend dressed entirely in black, hiding in the bushes beneath my window, apparently trying to spy on me. I immediately called to confront her, but she claimed she was at Walmart. The final incident occurred at our college's major spring concert. I was there with my new girlfriend, who is now my wife, to see one of my favorite bands, brand new. This was at least 6 months after the breakup. She appeared, walked directly up to us, looked my wife up and down, turned to me and said, "This is fine. I don't care. This is totally fine," then simply walked away. I honestly don't know what I was thinking for those 2 years. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.